Hello everyone. Alright, let me get the link shared out here. If you're watching a recording of this and it's only a couple minutes long, that's because it takes a little while to save the whole thing. And so if you come back in a little bit, the whole recording should be here. Alright, give me 1 minute to get the link shared out. I hope you're all doing well. Hey everyone. Hey Andrew, he says, I love your 2% per day screenshot. Yeah, it's certainly an interesting thing to consider. All right, well, let's get some context for where price is at here. And what I wanted to do with this live stream is I was doing a bunch of low time frame updates yesterday on the in the Discord on order flow, and I wanted to just talk through some of the live order flow here for a little while, sort of cement some of those concepts and explain them a little bit better for people. It's a little easier to do in video rather than written updates. But some local context here is prices ranging. Let me get rid of some of these because these are just potential ideas. But right now, from this pivot high to the pivot low, we're consolidating at our GP, a very reactive, important level. It's going to act as resistance with quite regularity, and we actually might look at some of that in this downtrend here. But yesterday we were in, let's even go to the 1 minute chart just to kind of get a sense for this choppy downtrend. And what I wanted to, kind of what inspired me to do this live stream is yesterday on this choppy downtrend, I had interests in longs, but right here, I had to completely cut the idea of getting long in anywhere in here. We can maybe talk about some of the levels there, as we had really, really clear signs of a big seller holding down price here, as something like $30 million here on Bybit of market buying got absorbed, creating this big bearish divergence. And this is just showing aggressive buying. This is the yellow line. I'll talk about this. Making much higher highs. This price just grinds down lower highs, and this is just somebody stepping price down, pushing it lower and lower and lower into liquidity. And so it'll be interesting to see how price interacts with some of this, some of these series of higher lows, and I think we'll probably get some interesting ideas in order flow here. Something that, so we'll look at this in a second. But I actually want to go over the technical price action here as well, as price was grinding down, and then we'll dive into live price action. But the idea there of just recognizing that seller is being pretty cautious, fighting with that big seller who's clearly driving price down. But we can see here, this is just kind of a technical idea here, is that price was really grinding down on a trend line, and interestingly this ended up being a series of GP retracements, so high to low. This is the 1 minute time frame. Not everyone was a GP, but just going pivot to pivot to pivot just on the lowest of time frames. You could even maybe pull this from here, but it's a bit of a region. I think this was GP from this high, but not this high. But anyways, that trend, we can just see pivot high, pivot low, GP, pivot high, pivot low, GP, pivot high, pivot low, GP. And even here, pivot high, pivot low, GP. So again, really reactive level. Right now we are at this pivot high, pivot low, GP. So on a bit of a wider time frame here, grinding down this trend line. And so I initially, let me go to the 15-minute chart here. I initially was interested in longs here, and I did take a long, and I took a stop. And then I took another long lower, but I cut it just above entry. And I gave that update because there was higher time frame levels I was interested in here. I gave the update in the Discord that I'm just going to get away from this long idea, because as the data is developing here, even though my trade hadn't been stopped out yet, there's just massive bearish divergences forming. And the kind of more disciplined approach here would just be to not fight this seller. And no reason longing into this when I'm getting all this new data that suggests price is likely to go lower. Then we start ranging here, had a nice sweep. I went to sleep around here, and I took another long on this sweep here. But price, so like the big levels to reclaim at the time, the higher time frame ideas here. Let me get rid of this. And I want to put those on the chart here because, yes, we're going to be looking at order flow, but I'm just going to re-pull everything. We're going to be looking at order flow, but we also want to be looking at all of the technical structures. So if we go to the daily time frame here, what are some of the levels we want to pay attention to? Well, we want to pay attention to the point of control here. This is an important high time frame level. We want to pay attention to these daily candles. So we're going to mark these out. Here's another daily candle. So we're going to see how price is interacting with these levels. We can even mark out some of these daily candles to the downside. Let me copy this one. We can just have these on here. There's two here, but we can be aware of that. All right. So my update here was that the major level to reclaim here, I'm gonna actually just make the point of control yellow just to distinguish it. The major level to reclaim here is just this daily candle, right? That's kind of the key idea for signs of strength. We ultimately tested it twice and rejected from it twice. Now, of course, there's local ideas. So coming into the New York Open, I said I was really interested in one of two ideas to get long. One would be a reclaim of the daily candle, and the other would be a tight kind of scalp entry off the low time frame, wicking through all these lows. We got this really tight wick set up, but price ultimately rejecting again from this trend line, made a new low. This all happened while I was asleep. Then we rally with a little bit of a bullish divergence between these lows into this current price action. But what I want to point out is that price is interacting with these daily candles as well. So we're aware of the levels at play here. These daily candles, a little bit of a reclaim, rejecting, testing back down to the point of control, back below this daily candle, which I'm quite certain is also a weekly candle low. Bring it down a little bit. In fact, let's just call this the weekly candle low. It's both. It's a weekly candle, it's a daily candle. So this is very important resistance. It's our GP, it's our weekly candle. on this local time frame. I mean, you could argue that a nice sign of strength would be to claim this level. But maybe, depending on how order flow shapes up here, we get some setups to the downside. Maybe coming back down, retesting a level like this. Right now, we'd have to take our point of control. And so we can be aware of how this local structure is forming and see if we get any clean setups that are supported by order flow, but not assuming we'll get anything actionable. My goal really here, first off, none of this is financial advice. If you're not an experienced trader, you should just be paper trading with fake money, or with inconsequential money. But I need to demonstrate this stuff on live charts, or it's really going to be hard to learn it. So my goal here is to take reasonable trade setups and just navigate the market to the best of my ability. And if I don't, my goal is not to just take trades, right? If I don't get clean setups that seem actionable on these lower time frames, then there's no reason to take them. And when I'm trading the lower time frames, I'm really just looking for trades that are going in my favor. I'm not really like, for example, you know, if I'm trading this as a range and I'm willing to scalp into positions on the lower time frames, it's about a 1% range. If I don't get immediate follow through breaking out through this daily candle, I'm just going to close it. And why would I do that? Well, a sign of strength would maybe have been claiming the daily candle here, and on the low time frames, you're turning that low time frame entry into potentially a swing trade. But if we don't claim it, then it's just a scalp. You're cutting it, and you could reopen on a reclaim and compound some of those profits into the position. Because there's no reason to start targeting high time frame ideas off a low time frame entry if you're not claiming some of the high time frame structure. So we're going to be applying some of those concepts today, looking for clean entries confluent with order flow. So what are the major levels here in this local range that we could maybe, well, the major local levels that we could maybe be paying attention to? Well, we have the weekly candle, we're rejecting from it, aligned with a local GP here. It's also a point of control within the range. Not surprising, as price has consolidated around here, and wouldn't be surprised to see some pretty high volume coming in at these wicks as people get stopped up shorts and long for breakouts. I would also let's just see how clean this looks if I draw it out like this. I don't want to make the chart too messy. And let's actually label this major POC. Also wouldn't be against just labeling this as a range, potential range, where we could see something like this. And so the levels I'd be interested in trading around, and we'll see if these ideas are supported around order flow, is the range locally. Right now we have a GP aligned with this daily candle, a little bit of horizontal support. This could offer an interesting long setup if we reject here. Could be a 2R setup to the top of the range. That could be turned into a bigger setup if we break out and claim this range. The other idea is shorting a sweep of this range high, which is the GP of this time frame high to low, just the impulse origin, the pivot to the low, come up, take this downtrending liquidity, look for the rejection. Probably want to be running this a little wider from a sizing perspective. We'll see. And there's kind of a couple ways that you could trade this. One would be to recognize that, well, if we reject from here, this pivot low on this 5-minute time frame becomes our GP. Maybe we just wick right into the 618. I would call this a predictive fib, which is just to be aware that what would a rejection here look like on the chart and a retracement? Well, it would look like this, and we'd come and double bottom this low, and a sign of strength might be big bullish divergence, a lot of long stopped out. So it might be a prudent target for a TP on a short, and then the other target would be if we break that down into the range lows. Both of those targets could all offer low time frame long setups, targeting into the range highs. And we can maybe justify trading this a little tighter too, like something like a 7 or 8 hour setup to the range lows, something like a 4 to 5 hour setup. And if we get that quick wick, lots of volume, I probably would trade it something like this, just to stop right above the wick, but we'll see what happens. So this is an interesting level. This is an interesting level. It becomes more interesting after we've rejected from these local highs, because it also aligns with a major fib retracement. And then the range low is an interesting level. There are some major levels to the downside around 64,500. It's a major GP, major pivot. And it actually kind of has a similar look to it here on the higher time frames, which is just we have this little pivot low aligned with our major GP, or minor GP rather, high, low to high, 618. And from a liquidity perspective, we take out all of these lows, and that could be a tradable level as well. But we're going to be focusing on the low time frames today. Confining, for me anyways, I'm going to be confining my trades within the levels on this local chart. All right, so why wouldn't I maybe be interested in shorting this GP? Well, a couple reasons. One, it's being hammered right now for, let me get rid of some of these levels here. It's being hammered right now. So we have a point of control, we have a GP, we certainly have local technical resistance for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th time. Secondly, we have some bullish divergences. They're not huge, but they are notable, forming into the level. As some selling here is getting absorbed locally. So we see CBD making a lower low, price making a higher low. This is signs that there's some limit buyers sitting here at this, in this region, willing to hold up price. Why would they be doing that? Well, probably aiming to push price higher. And so for that reason, from an order flow perspective, again, this would be like a little bullish divergence too, between this low and this low, price making a higher low, CBD making a lower low, and a rally out of there. But similarly, I'm not going to be interested in shorting this level into a bullish divergence. Now in the really low time frames, we did have a bearish divergence forming across the first touches here, with the initial high, a retest, a retest. So CBD making the higher high, price making equal highs. That's bearish on this time frame. Saw a little sell off into that. But so maybe scalpable for sure. It's about a 1% move to the downside. So we're going to stay somewhat patient here. Looking for, and that doesn't mean we can't retrace deeper, but just explaining why I would be interested in a short. But let me go to the lowest of time frames, and we could talk about what might be the most ambitious long here, because there might be a long setup that could be interesting. Again, sorry that this chart has gotten a little messy here, but I think it's important. I actually also want to pull this, and so this would be the absolute most. We have a little ascending trend line here too, ascending structure. Most ambitious long setup two ways to maybe look at this to develop. One would be just a retest of this daily candle. It's somewhat aligned with this trend line, wouldn't be perfect. The other would be the point of control, and trade off what is likely to be a bullish divergence here, targeting these range highs. Now, a lot of people, again, I don't know what's going to happen, and I can only, I like to focus on what's reasonable, and I always use that term because your goal is not to make a series of perfect decisions as a trader, is to make a series of reasonable decisions. And so I always get asked questions like, where would you place your stop? So like, for example, if you wanted to trade this as a low time frame, we're on the 1 minute chart here, as a low time frame setup. Let me get rid of this golden pocket. I think it's just a redundant level. Well, could you justify this with a stop immediately under this low? It's also the middle of the range here. Maybe a little bit more room to breathe here. Middle of the potential range, center line of high to low range. So we have some confluence here. Maybe you'd also want to be aware of where the GP is aligned here. And this would be, and the reason, for those of you that don't know, this would be on the lowest of time frames, a setup. I would trade on mini time frames, the daily chart, the 4-hour chart, but I always kind of preach that price action is fractal. So the same types of ideas that you would apply to the daily chart, you could apply to the 1 minute chart. But of course, one thing that I always like to be aware of is, even if you're trading the low time frames, is to be aware of where the high time frame levels are in the context of the low time frames. So you always want to have those marked out. You kind of want to know, for example, that these daily candles and weekly candles are here. Why? Well, look at price interacting with them, right? So even if you're trading the lower time frames, you want to be aware of your higher time frame levels, the weekly candles, this major point of control sitting here. Not getting the cleanest reactions, but generally should be important. And then start thinking about your local low time frame structures. So would you run a stop like this? Well, I mean, trading this up to the highs of the range, this is like a 12-hour, 10-hour trade, 11-hour trade, 10-hour trade. And maybe you're only taking profits here under two conditions, which is a rejection. I guess it's one condition, a rejection. And so you're willing to try to carry it as a swing. It's unlikely that price just breaks out and doesn't break through this level and trigger a profit taking event. But if it does, you give it the chance. And if this just happens, then you're just in a super tight invalidation, now swing trade, right? And you've maybe trailed a partial stop loss as a TP. But it's not hard to imagine that if we do break out of here, there's no structure, that price could just move really quickly through this area of the chart, and you've accomplished a massive trade out off of a low time frame entry. But is it reasonable to run a stop loss this tight on a setup like this? Well, here's the issue with it, and there's a few different ways to approach it. The first I would say is that you're rewarded for the extra risk and the lower probability setup with an increased risk reward. I mean, you're running, in this case, a 0.2% stop loss. And the reward is you have a very nicely sized position into this, and you're getting paid better odds. And now it's really important to remember that for anyone watching this who's new to trading, that there's a lot of other concepts at play here, and one of those is risk management. So when you're calculating how you're going to trade something, for me personally, I'm never risking more than 1 to maybe 2% of my trading account on a single trade, and it could be less, right? That's at most. And again, if you're not an experienced trader, there's no reason to be putting meaningful capital at risk. But anyways, But you want to be aware, one, you have your little local GP right below this, middle of the range. Secondly, you have your major point of control. So might it make sense to widen up this stop a little bit and decrease the size to encompass all three of these levels because they're all so close? Because what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is that you're in this position, and this could be applied to any time frames. You're in this position, price reclaims, you've triggered your long, and then this happens. Well, then you're kind of maybe wanting to look to get long again because the setup sort of is still the same. And then this happens, and you bounce off the point of control, and you've actually turned this into 3 trades, and it's kind of the same idea. And whether price bounces off this daily candle, wicks through it a little bit, 0.2, 0.3% into the major point of control. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. So maybe with all these stack levels, if you're trading the higher low, you might want to consider widening up that stop to encompass all of them. There isn't actually a right or wrong answer here. It's just to understand that you're being rewarded by the dramatically increased risk reward of trading the setup. And the trigger is the reclaim here, really tight. But you're taking on the risk of more likely to get stopped out on a minor retracement and the setup working anyways. In which case you might re-enter it if you're scalping. There's another way. I want to actually go over one more concept here, which is this. You put all of the levels into the trade. So something like a 5R setup up to these local highs here, or into your invalidation. You enter this, but if price starts breaking down, you could cut at a partial loss. And so instead of taking a full stop loss here, you're cutting here at like a point, let's call it a 0.3R, 0.4R loss, depending on how cleanly you cut it. You're going to reopen it if this happens, and you're just out of the trade with a partial loss. So this setup is a little iffy to do this on, just how these levels are stacked up close to each other. But there are ideas where you size for the wider position. So it's kind of like your size for this, but this is still actually sort of your invalidation in a way. And sometimes what that can do, if you read the room right, is you've taken a partial stop, and maybe you've tried 2 or 3 long setups and none of them work, and that is the equivalent of one loss because you took partials on structure breaks. But anyways, I just want to go over that as a potential idea. And that is much easier to apply to higher time frames. So where like maybe you have, let's just imagine this was a daily chart, and you have this happen, and you've sized a little wider. And over the next day or two, if price starts reclaiming the level, you take the partial at like a 0.2, 0.3R loss, and then it breaks down and you just re-enter. But you save yourself from taking the full loss on the breakout just by sizing for the wider invalidation, but cutting for the tighter invalidation. All right. Sorry, I don't have a second monitor running here, so I'm not really looking at the comments. I just see the last comment here. Yeah, I trade on a separate computer than I stream on. But anyways, let's for me, if I'm looking at scalping something like this, I have the trade set up. I know the size I'm going to mark it in with, and I have my hard stop already placed into the order, and I'm only marketing it in on a trigger. Now, I don't really, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the order flow here, how much volume comes in taking these local lows, and we're going to maybe pay attention to that local low. I wouldn't be surprised to see the deeper retracement. Now, there's a part of me here, well, we'll just see what happens. Taking this low doesn't really look so bad. Because we have we do have a little bullish divergence forming between these lows, but you could kind of argue it's starting to get neutralized. But we're just gonna see what these buyers are made out of. If we get that nice clean trigger here. Now, when you're scalping like this, again, I mean the absolute. I've traded the 15-second chart scalping, the 5-second chart. I've actually been able to achieve hundreds of trades in a day. You're expecting to take a lot of losses and maybe a lot of wins, maybe 50-50, maybe less, but you're looking for the asymmetry to be your winners are bigger than your losers. And that's the idea that you're trying to apply to all your trading. So let's see what happens as we take these lows. If I don't like the looks of this, I'm just not going to execute a trade. So far, there's just nothing. There's nothing here happening where I'm like, oh, this is looking good, but that could all change. And there's been examples of that where I'm not going to go back and look at them, but where I had no interest in a level, and then some kind of innocuous looking lows got took, and there's 100 million volume and 40 million negative delta in a big candle and a big wick, and it's like, oh, maybe I will trade around that level. There's a lot more liquidity there than I thought there was. So that can happen on lower time frames. But let's see. This is the example of the absolute lowest time frame. And that's kind of what we need to look at here while we wait for some of the other levels to come into play. Because just remember, I started out marking out this whole idea, which is built around the middle of the range getting retested, these local lows getting swept. We have a major POC, a daily candle, some levels in this region. Just giving an example of the absolute lowest time frame structure here that may offer a trade, but not necessarily the most compelling level. But let's just see what happens here. If we can interpret anything actionable. But structurally, it's kind of easy to see. There's a bit of a range here. So what would you expect to see as this breaks down? Well, you'd expect to see kind of a quick little wick move down. And from order flow, you'd expect a big spike in volume relative to all these other candles with a big negative delta increase. And that's going to be longs getting stopped out. So that's what you'd expect to see. If we go into this order flow, you can sort of if you're to imagine how traders are positioned here, well, trailing stops under lows, maybe some people interested in shorting a breakdown of this, targeting even into these lows or these lows. And if we don't see something like that, well, it doesn't look so interesting to trade. And if we just break down with weakness, then you're really looking at these lows. And again, we're going to be interpreting the order flow to see if there's anything that looks actionable. Also worth noting, we did form a little bearish divergence here. It's nothing major. I mean, obviously there's not a ton of activity here, but just some little signs of a limit seller sitting here as price makes a lower high, as CBD makes a higher high. Little sign of local absorption. Somebody's trying to push price lower into some liquidity to the downside. So from an order flow perspective, as these lows initially are getting tested, in my view, there's just nothing happening here yet. So like if you're just looking at the chart, you might be like, okay, I mean, anything can happen. You could be like, okay, I'm about to take my long setup. If we reclaim this candle, we're testing the trend line. There's a lot of technical ideas here on this lowest of time frame, but it's hard to say there's anything compelling happening here from an order flow perspective. Like, you haven't just run a bunch of liquidity. There's really nothing happening here, no volume. And so for that reason alone, I would not be interested in taking a trade here. Now, it is a range, and I'm not going to be surprised if price rotates back up to the highs of the range, or because technically this is the type of level you're expecting price to interact with. But for me to put on risk here into these little bearish divergences forming, no volume tapped, no liquidity. I mean, even on these lower time frames, it's not like you need 50 million volume in a candle if you're scalping the low time frames. But you know, this isn't really, in my view, actionable volume or delta. You know, get us 3-4 million. That'd be kind of nice, or at least something to work with. So as of now, I'm going to assume that I'm not going to get a trigger that I like here. And I can always just change my perspective if I do. But so let's just imagine another scenario. And I'm just keeping things on the 1 minute chart just to sort of separate the price action a little bit. But maybe a breakdown of this. Something like that. Alternatively, like this, but then you're kind of risking a stop on the let's come down, retest this daily candle, the GP of the move, these lows, kind of near the value area low of the range as well. Maybe there's a little descending structure at play here. You also had signs of a seller here as well before this sell-off, as price start grinding down here. I can just point that out really quickly. So when you're using order flow, just looking to see how traders are positioning. Here we just see this grinding price action into local bearish divs and then a sell-off. Same thing here. All right, so now price is coming down. We have a little bearish divergence here. This is what we're kind of looking for. We understand that, yes, even if we're scalping here, there's a little wick or reaction, but there's really no reason to be looking to get long there, certainly from a volume and order flow perspective. Still nothing too substantial, so just waiting. Price testing now that other daily candle, the middle of the range, kind of wicking through the trend line that we identified, but volume and delta here, in my view, just not actionable. This is where I would just anticipate that price is likely to go lower. And of course, the trigger would just be a reclaim anyways. But even if we wick up through this level, because there's so little delta and volume here, I'm not really interested in this trade coming off this wick at all. In fact, I'd be wary of this little trend line here. But as a little technical level, it doesn't look so bad. So just distinguishing a little bit between the order flow and the technical levels here. You have these range lows, the idea of sweeping them into the middle of the potential higher time frame channel, this daily candle. Could imagine this looking like a nice little liquidity grab before another move to the upside. The only reason it doesn't look very appealing is there's no liquidity. So it's kind of hard to call it a little liquidity grab when there's no volume, no negative delta, and in fact, even off the rally, we see longs now coming in aggressively. Not a lot, but 500,000 positive delta here, rather than shorts or people getting stopped out. And a little bit more bearish divergence is forming. So we have a limit seller sitting here, right? Pushing price into liquidity, you would imagine. Again, I'm not trying to pretend I can predict exactly what will happen, but in a game of probabilities, well, there's no reason not to be expecting lower here as a seller is pushing price down. We have aggressive longing coming in and probably about to add to some liquidations here. We actually kind of saw something similar here, which was as we were chopping around here, we kept kind of breaking down, taking lows. We have these bearish divergences forming, and I was kind of surprised to see, as price just kept making a new low, making a new low. Usually you'd see some a little bit more negative delta in these candles, and there, you start asking yourself, where are all these stop losses? Because you're kind of expecting there to be a big flush in delta. And eventually we took them. And so I'm actually going to was I on the wrong chart there? No. So same thing here, looking for that flush in delta at a minimum. I'll just say, like yesterday at the time, this is where I'm saying I'm out of my long right around entry, just waiting again. Not wanting to fight this seller. This is in the Discord. We'll just let things play out, looking for another sweep of the lows. And just pointing out the bearish divergences here, saying watching for all these longs to get taken out with this decrease in delta here. About 30 million positive delta has been absorbed here locally. Someone putting in work to hunt the stops. And we have this grindy price action. And so what I was saying here is that although there was kind of nice levels here, the order flow and the price action locally is looking really nasty. Like, yeah, you could be maybe looking at this region, these levels from higher, but now that we're here, this doesn't look so good. And looking for that move down to get these positions flushed. And I'll just say that the same thing is happening here on the 1 minute chart. Whereas this little grinding price action on the 1 minute chart is developing, or I call it the 5 minute chart too. What might have been kind of interesting here just is not interesting at all. I mean, we're just seeing longs getting absorbed, no liquidity grabbed. And so applying that kind of same principle, which is, hey, I might have been interested in this idea, but now that we're here, I'm not interested. Price can do whatever it wants. The kind of disciplined approach here is just to sit and let this play out, because what's the actionable idea here from an order flow perspective? And for anyone wondering, I mean, I've had, when I'm doing live order flow analysis, well, of course I have to do this on the low time frames, right? We're looking at the orders that are coming into the market right now, how traders are positioning themselves. Is there anything actionable or interpretable with what is happening candle through candle, moment through moment, or even over the context of 15, 20, 30 minutes? And I would just say that the clearest way that I could interpret this is that there is a seller pushing price towards liquidity that's becoming more and more apparent with each passing candle. And there's no evidence that that liquidity has been tapped yet. So put 1 and 2 together, maybe lower being the more probable outcome into this grinding price action. So if lower is the more probable outcome, even if price chops around a little bit here first, until that's not the case, look for lower before taking longs. And again, it's not about being perfect. It's just about making reasonable decisions. This program is called Exocharts. Somebody in the Discord asked. Something else we could look at really quickly, which is kind of interesting, is the BlackRock ETF order flow. So this was, I would just say that, well, let me actually delete some of these. This is all of the BlackRock ETF history here. By the way, you can't get this. Like if you pay for Exocharts, for example, you can't get this for free. Like to add this data is a couple grand a year. The BlackRock data specifically. But anyways, here we could call this a massive high time frame bullish divergence forming in CBD. It's really aggressive selling coming in throughout this uptrend. And I would interpret this as quite bullish. But there's something kind of interesting that happened here in the BlackRock ETF order flow data, which is it spent a brief period of time essentially being a cheat code. Like every spike to the upside ended up in a clean sell-off. Every bullish divergence played out. And it got to the point where, essentially had a 100% hit rate on these divergences. And so I do want to talk a little bit about that. It's funny because I started sharing this BlackRock ETF data in the Discord early on. And I said, hey, this data could be really nice to keep an eye on. I always have to check and see if I'm on the right screen. Okay, yeah, I am. Because, I mean, unlike many of the crypto exchanges out there like Binance and even Bybit and other things, it's not a very highly regulated industry. So in theory, the order flow data should be a lot cleaner on something like the BlackRock ETF. And as I progressively started looking at it, and I was excited about it because I thought, man, it could be very actionable. I mean, it really was. It was really like if you had a bearish divergence forming in the order flow, it was actionable. A bullish divergence, actionable. Big pump to the upside. And I even started kind of working on some ideas about trapping traders with weekend gaps and things like that. So you could imagine, like, you sell really aggressively, and the price is different here because it's relative or constrained to the Bitcoin price, but it's not the same as the Bitcoin price. But then you have a big weekend gap punishing all these sellers, and for Friday. But anyways, it essentially became, if you had aggressive buyers coming in, you had a big sell-off. If you had aggressive sellers coming in, price rallies. But as soon as the aggressive buyers come in, big sell-off, vice versa. You have aggressive selling, so on and so forth. And then it started becoming much more difficult to interpret. But again, just big buyers, sell-offs, so on and so forth. Buyer, sell-off deeper. And now we've just been selling off, selling. And this kind of looks more like some of the higher time frame order flow you'd get out of a lot of exchanges, which is sort of everything goes down and to the right on the higher time frames as price goes higher. And so maybe I'm a little bit less enthralled by the IBIT order flow data, but still keeping an eye on it. Because maybe this could be a clue to a big bullish divergence forming into a massive rally on Bitcoin. Maybe just making one open to some of those higher time frame bullish ideas. And I'll just say that a similar idea here applies to Bitcoin on the higher time frames. Or just mid time frames, let's say. It's not even that high of a time frame. Where across this range, if we want to call this a range, we do just have generally a bullish divergence forming. Price making equal lows, CBD making lower lows. With some clues forming here of price getting pushed down lower, being these little bearish divergences in the downtrend. And so where you might have conflicting order flow data, where you could have on a mid time frame or a higher time frame the bullish divergence, but then on the low time frame the bearish divergence, you have a big bullish divergence maybe forming in order flow with clues of price pushing to make a potentially higher low in the low time frames. All right, so for the local update here, we see bearish divergences forming here. Price grinding down into this local support and whatever potential, and now actually kind of flipping the level into resistance. Like this just looks like an SR flip now. So whatever ideas there could have been, would have been, should have been for looking for a scalp long there are just of no interest. Could you short it? Certainly. You can structure trades around shorts, shorting into the downtrend, shorting into the retest. But you're kind of just, in a case like this, if you're just scalping a short based on order flow, you're just shorting into until, hey, where's the liquidity? Where's the big high volume, high delta candle? But you have to kind of recognize that you're making the decision to short into local support in a sense. I always like to structure my trades more interested in shorting at resistance and longing at support, less interested in breakout trades. And that ultimately, like, no matter how Bitcoin's just so punishing on so many time frames for trading horizontal range breakouts, like 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're scalping, right? Like maybe if you're trading this, you trade it really wide. Like you trade it as like a swing position, claiming the weekly candle size to survive all of this local price action. But scalping into these little breakouts, very, very punishing. And I'd say the same thing goes for, breakdowns. You can do it, but scalping with tight invalidation into little breakouts and breakdowns, price just loves chopping around. Now, if I saw 8 million longs open and get absorbed, that kind of changes the equation a little bit. I'll say this is a case where, like, I could see somebody being tempted into this trade. Like, I could imagine being tempted to put on the trade here because let's just kind of zoom out a little bit. Let's just form a narrative here that could make sense if you're a trader. You were interested in this level, you're trying to decide if you want to put in a trade, and you start thinking like, well, maybe I should put on this long. Like, we're at the middle of the range, we have horizontal support, and again, the trade could just work. We're bouncing off of the previous highs, this daily candle, and the idea here would be like we fake out the trend line breakdown. So like people are watching this trend line and it breaks down, and we have this descending trend line and we squeeze out the liquidity and I scalp it back into the point of control. And you could convince yourself to get into this trade, and it kind of isn't a bad idea, right? You have levels here, and it's like, well, why not just take the trade? And for me, when using order flow as a gauge here, the discipline would just be to say, I don't know what's going to happen here. Like, I'm not certain price is going to break down. I'm not certain, but it's not really an actionable idea order flow wise to trade into this level, even though it kind of looks nice. Like, it is kind of a clear level. You have the daily candle retest here. But anyways, I don't know. I don't know if that resonates with anyone. But, when people talk about not forcing trades and just being okay to sit and wait, that applies to scalping too. Scalping doesn't necessarily mean that you have to trade every 1 minute candle. You can still wait for clean triggers. And for me, this would be a setup I'd be interested in if order flow was a little bit more supportive of the idea. But because it's not, I would just let it go. Kyle Chase saying, just looking at your exo chart, divergences and was comparing to Coinalyze, and it's not showing the same thing, maybe because it's free. Coinalyze should be identical. It is free and it's a great alternative. You don't get the footprints, but you get the CVD line data, which is perfectly reasonable to rely on. So it's possible you're on the wrong pairing. Like this is BTC USD perp. You could be on USDT. Maybe you're not on Bybit. But yeah, very possible that you're on the wrong. And maybe this will make sense to some of you and maybe it won't. Like for example, if price goes up here, I just have to check here. If say price goes up and we break up into this range, and there can be a thought here. It could be, well, why rely on order flow here? Why rely on seeing maybe a bunch of traders stopped out and you could have just taken that trade and it would have won. But when we're looking at these low time frames, I mean, this should make sense. You can't necessarily long the sweep of every 1 minute candle. Can't come in here and just say like, oh, I'm long here and I'm long here and I'm long here, because obviously we're in a game of probabilities. If you're scalping the 1 minute chart, you kind of want the quote unquote stars to align a bit. So obviously we're not just going to scalp the sweep of every time a 1 minute candle gets broken down and quote unquote reclaimed. We're not going to long that. So maybe we want to start looking at some technical levels. Maybe we want an alignment of some local levels aligned with some higher time frame levels, like the middle of the range sort of idea, the daily candle. You know, maybe you have trending structure, and then maybe you want a little bit of an order flow confluence. But you know, for me, the probability suggests that lower is more likely locally. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. So I wouldn't be interested in this setup taking along on this reclaim. And that's how I would just distinguish between taking the trade and not taking the trade. Because the only problem here with using order flow discretions as a discretionary thing is that you're going to have a lot of trades planned out that ultimately would have worked, especially on the low time frames. But you're also going to have a lot of trades that you don't take that didn't work, and it saved you from taking them. Because what would happen if this happens? Well, it would be the exact, and ultimately if this happens and we have a big breakout, it would actually be the exact setup that was quote unquote planned from up here, right? Coming down to the daily candle, reclaiming, and longing with tight invalidation. And so that can always be a little frustrating in some sense, but the alternative, and I'm just gonna open up the conversation here a little bit. You take it with the wide trade setup, with the hope of a strong move, and you cut it if you see continued signs of weakness. Although I would at least wait for this trend line to break, and you cut it as a partial loss, like a 0.1, 0.2R loss. And so what is that doing? Just from like a fundamental perspective? Well, it's sort of hedging your position by saying, all right, well, order flow is not supporting this idea. Maybe if we break out of this descending structure, I'll put on the trade, but because it's not looking particularly good from an order flow perspective, but still calling it a scalp, I'm just going to greatly reduce the risk. So that could just be with tighter invalidation and wider size, or smaller size and tight invalidation, or smaller size and wide invalidation. You can decrease the risk a lot of ways, but you could put on the technical trade, but maybe not trade at full size because there's not an order flow confluence. So just saying that there's no right or wrong way to make some of these decisions. There's just reasonable ways, because there's lots of ways to make reasonable decisions. And that's our goal, not to always make the right decision. It's really hard to define what the right decision is. Wait, what is... Oh, I don't disagree. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. CryptoCrane saying the swing failure with a failed auction at 66,500 is a good edge for a long. What are you seeing in order flow that makes you think lower? No, I think it's a great trigger for a long. What he's referring to is coming in and taking this low, reclaiming it, another low here. Sweeping the low, reclaiming it. But we're just looking at lower time frames here, local time frames, local setups. All right, give me 1 minute. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. I actually did want to look at some alts. I haven't taken a long here on FET, but I did have the idea of watching this wick from up higher. FTM is also approaching a level of interest that I would be interested in trading into just on the daily time frame. A lower high. Waves also had a nice ping off a major low here. But I'm going to let waves consolidate a bit here, and I might be interested in taking a trade up into the highs of this range again, but we'll see. I'm going to jump into it on the low time frames. Kind of forming a bit of a triangle here. Something like that would be a pretty clean low time frame trigger though. Take profits into the descending structure, get a nice tighter setup, and then carry the rest maybe as a swing. I'm keeping an eye on it. And the idea here is that it'd be nice if it interacted with this little channel structure. The idea here is that, well, if you're going to take a trade anywhere on waves, you know, maybe this is an okay place to take a stab. This established low from 2022. And if you break down its easy invalidation, just don't want to be long if price is breaking down this level. And maybe wanting to be long as a range here if it's not. One thing that I think I mentioned this on my last live stream, is that it sure looks like a lot of alts structurally want lower, and has looked that way for several days, while Bitcoin maybe doesn't. Again, this was an idea on the live stream too, of I haven't taken an ETH trade yet here. Looking for this wick to get swept. I talked about on the last live stream. Just don't know how I like the looks of this here, but we'll see. Call this little breakout too. I'm gonna be keeping an eye on ETH. Cardano also approaching a level of interest. Lots of squiggles from the last live stream. Say also approaching a level of interest. But yeah, a lot of these alts, you could just imagine running these lows. I think this would be interesting on file. I think this would be interesting on Matic. Sort of all daily time frames. Wicking around this trend line here. And if we got those levels, well, we're probably looking at that move down into the 64,500 region on Bitcoin. I'll come in and clean up these charts a little later. We can look at some of those higher time frame ideas as well. Reviewing some of the requests that I got in the last live stream. So I shared the idea of price coming down and retesting the old all-time high as a potential idea. We are getting that. And then longing. Let me clean up this and then longing a reclaim of this wick, which we haven't gotten yet. Price still consolidating below it. So maybe that's something worth looking at as well. Got slightly front ran on a Pepe idea, which was this was up at the highs here. Just shared in the Discord of there's some high time frame levels I like on Pepe, and how I would maybe trade the lower time frames into the higher time frames. And I talked about the idea of coming in and longing this up into these local highs, and maybe looking at shorting this down into these and trading this back up into this. That's just a rough example, but I never got that alert and trigger on Pepe. Doge also at its GP, testing a wick low. High time frame levels below, but mid time frame GP high to low, taking these wicks. Could have been a nice clean scalp entry there. Not a lot of volume coming in here on Bitcoin. We can see just a little bit of bearish absorption happening here as price consolidates, grinds down. But yeah, for the reasons I've already listed, I'm just not interested in longs here personally. Do have quite a few alts that I'm looking at, willing to put on some trades if I get clean triggers. I really like this 50-cent region on FET, but I know it's getting merged with a new coin. I wonder. It's been a while since I've looked at AVAX. Is this log scale? Yeah. Yeah, somebody asked me to look at AVAX. Just want to be aware of the GP, some nice reactions off of it already to the tune of 40, 50%. Locally in a range. Flipping this point of control into resistance. It'll ping off the middle of the channel into the point of control, selling off into some local lows. I mean, the obvious kind of idea here would just be to take this low. Oh, it looks quite clean on the weekly chart. You have a nice tight invalidation long setup. Similar idea of shorting the range high into the range low. Take profits within the range. Might be worth looking at this on log. Let's go to the 4-hour chart here. Well, I mean, this is pretty compelling on a quick breakdown. I would certainly be interested in trading this if we interacted with the took this pivot low into this GP, into this channel. We need a pretty quick move down. I mean, that would look really nice on a big flush. And it's sometimes nice just to have those ideas planned out. Oh, I am on the wrong screen. Damn. All right. Well, I can't remember all I looked at, but we're looking at AVAX here. And I was just looking at the higher time frames, lower time frames. I'm on log scale right now. I said the kind of obvious idea would have been, well, just to look for this low to get taken. And I mean, it's just a kind of a clean range setup. We have a little range here forming on non-log. We've had a nice 50% bounce off of our GP here, high to low, 50% bounce. And we've been ranging here on the daily chart. But on logarithmic scale, something like this would be quite interesting if we broke down this range and come and take these pivot lows into our logarithmic GP, maybe this little ascending structure, and I'd be quite interested in trading around that if we got it. And it's not to say that's necessarily the most likely outcome, but it's something to certainly be aware of as a potential trade setup. It could be a nice clean opportunity even as a swing position. Kind of curious to see where the point of control is here. Yeah, so it also aligns with our point of control of this range. So this, I mean, the channel is a little ambitious. We would need to basically, by the end of the month, come down to this level. But it's not hard to imagine if we do break down these lows that we could travel through this area on the chart very quickly. So it's worth having on the chart. That's all I'm saying. I'd be interested in it if I got it. So if these alerts go off, I'll come and take a look at AVAX. And if I don't remember what I was thinking about, well, these lines should be helpful. But locally, we're in a range, right? And, you know, you don't have to necessarily assume there'd be a breakdown here. And maybe worthwhile to look at trading around this level. But this looks quite clean on a high time frame. And maybe there's even a little descending channel. Certainly a descending trend line. Well, if it happens tomorrow, there's also an intersection between these channels, but that's not very likely. Maybe we buy ourselves a couple days here if we pull it correctly. I have a little bit of my INJ short running. This was an idea on the last live stream of just coming and retesting this level. Trading this as range. I'm not saying that AVAX will obviously break down. I mean, this isn't likely. This is just one of those cases where you would probably want to take the trade, or I would want to take the trade if I got the opportunity to, but it requires one, a really quick move to the downside. It requires a breakdown of all of these horizontals. But again, it's really just, instead of being at a loss, if something like this were to happen, I'm prepared to seize some opportunities there. Sol kind of has this same thing on Sol, right? We have this ascending structure here. Not necessarily saying we will break down, but it would be kind of interesting if we broke down this ascending structure. Maybe we form a little range here, taking these lows, retest, and come down and test this major level around $80. That could be a nice long setup. Come back and retest these highs that formed when we retested this. I don't know. We'll see. Lots of ideas on the higher time frames. Require a little bit of patience. Trading's all about patience. think we have a 4-hour candle and an hour and a half. You know, maybe we could look at pulling. Let's look at doing some kind of more. I don't know, some more advanced TA. Let's just throw all this into a folder. Let's kind of get some. I wouldn't say necessarily advanced. Just have a point of control here. We have our GP. Unsurprising, it's resistance. You know, probably just shorting into this, putting on a little bit of risk isn't the craziest thing. I'd be kind of interested to pull some. Let's pull some fib time. This high. There was this idea of this ascending channel here that we've broken down. It looked quite interesting at the time. Could argue pulling something like that too, which would okay. Yeah, I don't know. This is kind of it's kind of interesting to think about how to divide. I do not know what's happening, but for some reason all of the TA just keeps duplicating here. I'm also getting an alert on something I charted on the last live stream, so I just want to take a quick look at it. I'm not actually seeing it. Why do I have an alert going off on something that's not even in my Oh, it was probably still at the bottom. So I must have charted this up here. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, so this was the idea of price coming down into this point of control, retesting this horizontal. Somebody asked me to chart it on the last live stream. I'm just pointing out that you sort of have like a series of ascending structures here. Some logarithmic. Maybe looking at that as a zone for price to come back down into these trend lines, retest these highs, retest the point of control, and alternatively just come down and take these lows if not. So we're actually getting off of, you could call it the major trend line, which is just the absolute low to absolute low, the lowest trend line, a really clean bounce off of that. Starting to see some signs of strength. I've never traded this coin before, and obviously I drew this TA up here, but it's kind of interesting. And if you break the ascending structure, maybe just looking for lower here. I think it's an interesting idea, considering that you have that major point of control there. Kind of some horizontal levels at play. I've never had this happen before on my Bitcoin chart, which is that at least all the TA that I put in folders or delete just keeps coming back. So that's kind of an interesting development. Oh, maybe the internet's disconnecting. Has the stream been lagging? Maybe it's just not registering on the trading view. Alright, seems fine. I think XRP, pinging off the GP here, by the way. I think XRP has probably been one of the more challenging alts to trade for a long time, in that there's this really high time frame triangle idea on the logarithmic chart here. Credit to X-Force Global. He has a really bullish idea if this triangle holds for fifth wave. I think it's interesting to trade around. But if we go to these lower time frames, look how wicky all these lows have been. Like every time price tests any kind of support on XRP, It's very, very big wicky price action running the lows into this trend line. But the trend line is still holding. The price action just has not been clean at all. But even this, like, this is a nice bounce off a GP after the initial wick. Not a ton of structure here. You could just kind of call this a range. Some horizontal lows to maybe be interacting with. But I am interested in swing longs on XRP. Just been sort of a challenge to find some of those clean positions. But I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. Of course, having a base position here, I mean, the thesis is just run a wide stop, small size. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Your invalidation is just under the trend line because the whole thesis requires for this ascending structure to hold. So it's perfectly fine invalidation, and you're targeting a big move to the upside. Perfectly reasonable. Run that 15-20% stop loss, small size. Got a beautiful trade right there. But I would like to also come in here and find some tighter setups into this uptrend. And if we do start seeing some big signs of strength, I think there's massive risk reward benefits to be looking into trading lower time frame setups into higher time frame targets. And I will be doing that if we start seeing strength over the next several months on XRP. Yeah, someone says XRP equals put your money to sleep. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not hard to even imagine from a psychological perspective how people are going to feel about XRP and interact with any kind of strength out of XRP. I mean, it's been a very disappointing coin for anyone who's been invested in it long term. I haven't been invested in it long term, so I don't really have any emotional attachment to it. But I could just imagine that, you know, there's a capitulation, just a time-based capitulation on XRP. Lots of people just giving up on it. Could kind of be the psychological analysis of the big move. And even when it starts showing signs of strength, no one really cares. Yeah, we've seen it before. And then you just have the big move that everyone was waiting for on XRP. And a lot of those people who were bag holding, waiting for it, aren't participating because they finally capitulated. I have no dog in the fight, so to speak. For me, it's just a technical idea that I think is quite clean, that I'd like to trade around, but I could care less if XRP goes up or down or ever stops going sideways. We're kind of reaching the apex of this triangle, so I mean, it's again multi-year triangle. Price literally can't go sideways forever without breaking the triangle to the downside or the upside. So eventually we're going to find out one way or the other. Still a little bit of absorption happening on Bitcoin, bearish absorption locally. It's nothing major, but it's there. Just signs of a seller holding price down. And for me, just fading that little local scalp long idea, still waiting for lower. And it's not unreasonable to have short setups here either. given the bearish divergences, and you do have a little bit of a structural invalidation here. I'd clear off some of these levels on the chart, but it's they just keep coming back. Yeah, I know. Somebody's asking me to look at XRP Bitcoin. It looks, the XRP Bitcoin chart looks crazy. I'll pull it up here. Yeah. I mean, we're almost about to take this major low on the XRP Bitcoin chart. This is the daily chart, by the way. Look at it just grinding down against Bitcoin. Maybe wouldn't be so hard to imagine on the XRP Bitcoin chart what a massive rally would look like against Bitcoin. I'm not saying it could happen or will happen. I am saying it could happen. But just grinding down, and then you have a big breakout and impulse. Technically, we did kind of break out of this structure for a second and still are, but maybe that's the trigger. But yeah, it's not hard to imagine a big impulse. It's not like it would be the first time it's happened, right? Out of this grinding structure. I'm not short here, by the way, on Bitcoin or long. But it's but we can talk about reasonable ideas. I mean, I would like to see some of this structure interacted with a little bit more volume, just a little more clarity for scalping. Someone's saying, can you show order flow chart once price tried to break 69 to 70K area? Are we talking about here? I assume you're talking about here. Yeah. So this is after this first wick down, ranging. We did have bearish order flow forming into this. We did wick the highs a little bit here. But if you call this a range, like price aggressive longing coming in before new highs were made, this was a bearish divergence. We did wick and make new highs, and we did have a technical just perfect SR flip, 5 million delta at the highest there. It's nothing crazy. Have a rejection and then a little bit of bearish divergence before this sell off. But the technical kind of technical resistance here is just a really clean SR flip, which is you have a range, Price breaks down, retests the previous lows as resistance, and then sells off. That's why reclaims are so important. Like right now, we're actually SR flipping this weekly candle, and that should be taken seriously, I think, from bearish perspective. Because you'd be surprised how often price just cleanly interacts with these clean horizontals, which is, this is the weekly candle I'm referring to. You can mark it out here. Breakdown, retest, if we go to the 1 hour chart here. This is the actual candle, I think. But that's just an SR flip of a weekly candle. Flipping the previous candle into resistance. And it's not hard to imagine the bearish outcome here, which probably looks to send us down into this $64,500 region, which is quite a nice long setup, I think. I didn't notice this before, but interestingly, this is actually essentially a perfect parallel channel. And interestingly, they align here. So we're interacting with the middle of the channel right now. I mean, I'm not saying this is particularly likely, but like maybe coming and taking these lows, rejecting from the middle of the channel, highs of the channel. Maybe give it a little bit more time here. Can't give it too much time. I'm just thinking about technical interactions here. I'm actually going to keep this on my chart because this would look quite interesting. This puts us at the lows on Friday. We don't even have to build out another low on this channel. I'm just imagining, you know, if we reject from the middle, put in a minor low, a third higher low, lower high rather, then on Friday come down into this channel, and then maybe come out and break out through this liquidity. Yeah, I'm actually quite interested in this. I like the confluence of this descending structure into this ascending structure, the timing perspective of it on Friday. That would be quite a nice, this would be a really nice progression of price action. If we could just come run these lows today, impulse up into these highs, have another little SR flip, take out all, this is a short I'm interested in, obviously, locally. Take out all these local highs into the GP of the move, into the ascending channel, so the timing would be kind of nice there on Thursday. And then a move down into these lows. Until this channel breaks, I'm definitely going to use it as a timing confluence. Sometimes if you just stare at the charts for a while, you just see new things you didn't see before. Kind of makes this short, you know, that's a nice little continuation idea. Easy invalidation if price breaks up above here. Got the point of control. But I'd say the little local mid time frame idea as well. This would be interesting, wouldn't it? Come in front run some lows here. And look to put in this major low on Friday. Whatever, we'll see. We'll see if the channel remains relevant. I'll go trend based. Let's do this. Trend base 786. So it's pretty close. So from a timing perspective, just interesting to look at the fib time here of the channel. You have something like this 0618, the 1-to-1 extension. You'd have the 0618 time-based extension here as well, right around the Thursday, about an hour before the New York Open. Call it a little bit of a region. So Thursday is New York Open, and then you'd have this about an hour after, maybe even like right at, within the hour of the New York Open on Friday at the 1-to-1. So just thinking about like the timing of this channel. You have Thursday's New York Open, give or take an hour. You have Friday's New York Open. This chart's getting a little wild. The timing of this isn't really pulled at all to base off anything. Just kind of imagining what a major pivot would look like there. I know this is messy. We have to clean it up soon. Sorry, I'm just kind of doing just a little bit of thinking, just thinking about the what this would all look like. But yeah, I'd be very interested in that swing to all-time high. I mean, I think overall, to me, order flow still has a bullish look to it. I think swing longs perfectly reasonable. It's just kind of interesting. This level here is so clean. I think I said here, like, I think everyone's waiting for this level, that when price was here, that it seems like it's either going to break down or front run. It just seems so obvious. And maybe it's not so obvious as I think. But it's kind of interesting. We have this high volume area down here, the value area low of the range. This would align a little closer to the major GP of the move. And I can't help but wonder, this looks like the confluence, say on Friday. If I pretty much have to trade this. If anything like this plays out and Friday New York Open, we're running these lows, and of course there's going to be a shit ton of liquidity under there. You don't even have to question it. I mean, any kind of reaction here, I need to trade. But it's kind of interesting to think about. Maybe we get a reaction there, and then come and run a little lower into the GP. There's not a lot of structural support here. So there's no specific lows to take. For example, we'd kind of be bouncing in a bit of a price action void into this impulse. But there's lots of clean technical levels. The 1618 extension, completing our ABC kind of idea here into the value area low, into the 618 of the entire move. Just kind of hard to spend too much time caring about that level when there's such a clean level above it. But probably my gut would be to pay attention to this $62,400 region if price gets down there. But yeah, like I really kind of like a level like this. It's just really hard not to take the trades in between, right, for as swing positions, because like how do you justify not taking that trade? You're just so much better. And I know this is like a complete mess now. 100% of the time, you just say you're better off taking the stop loss off an idea like this than you are trying to not trade levels like that, especially if there's clean confluence. But anyways, that said, I think this level is a lot more interesting than it looks. If price continues trading lower. Bearish divergences here, still kind of playing, or forming rather, not playing out. They're not huge. It's really just this slight grinding pressure, and it's not that the bearish divergence is huge here, it's just also signs that no liquidity has been tapped yet. So just kind of looking for a lower locally, I think, is the most reasonable thing. It's sort of like this, like where it could just develop into a cascade. We just have this little slight bearish divergence forming as price is grinding down. And at the very least for me, whether it's something you would structure a short around or not, I mean, could argue it's a high time frame idea because you're flipping that weekly candle with the local golden pocket and the local point of control as resistance right here. It certainly just isn't something I would scalp along into. There's just no sense for me to be trying to do that. Whether or not I anticipate extreme volatility today with Fed and rate news, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see it. But even in kind of times of extreme volatility, I'm still just trading around key levels. They just come quicker. So I'm saying it's the matrix. It was starting to look a little bit like the matrix there. All right, so some little bearish divergences forming. Price rejecting from, could call it this local point of control and local GP. With bearish divs becoming more apparent here. Could also kind of say we're flipping this into resistance. Some early signs of a breakdown. I'm just redrawing everything to get it just so we can see. We're noticing this descending channel here. Kind of interesting. It may align. And this is the exact same idea. I mean, I can show you so many examples of me trading this setup, which is a descending trending structure into the GP, another retest, especially you have that little local high there. And that's a short I'm interested in always. It kind of even just was the kind of basic structure of this entire low time frame downtrend. But I'm always interested in these types of ideas. They're quite clean. And you kind of have the you can kind of run them with tighter invalidation when you get that descending structure, because part of the thesis now becomes that this descending structure holds. The kind of most quote unquote famous one that comes to memory, as it were, is just on FTM. And I'm just gonna rely on it because we had this really nice makes sense. Nice descending structure here. And these were like 60-70% moves. 61%. And for those that were around back in 2022, was trading this channel. On FTM. Just a series of perfect kind of trending GP. Looking for those logs at the lows of the channel, the shorts at the highs of the channel, right into the GP. Was quite clean. And that would be kind of a similar idea to this structure. Doesn't mean it will work. It's just a nice little structure to base a trade around. Oh my God. Man, I need to get, I broke my second monitor. I need to go get a new one. I wasn't streaming the right screen. All right, well, let's go back to FTM. We're on the 4-hour chart here. This is back in 2022. Some of you may recall. But anyways, just a very clean channeling structure. These are big swings, 60%, 50%. And we're just forming this nice, clean, parallel channel. Ultimately ends up being kind of a minor major low, and then we just go sideways forever. Go retest the low, and here we are. But anyways, so you might remember looking to trade these shorts, this grinding move, and here, I mean, it's not, the thing is, it's not that the price action is identical, but you can really see the similarities in the structure from a relative perspective, which is a descending channel moving up into the 618 of the previous highs. And that would be the idea of this short, right? And it's a structure that I'm always looking to trade. Just on a different time frame. And traded this back in 2022. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of becomes hard not to be a little skeptical about price going higher if we start breaking all of this down. Just a comment from Elway saying if 63K breaks down. But yeah, I personally would be interested in this 62.5K region. There's just not a lot of clean structural triggers, but I would probably be open to trades around there. Some high volume areas, the volume profile kind of shifts depending on the time frame you pull it in. But maybe our value area low there. Of course, the difficult thing is, well, you kind of have two options. When you're trading, let's just say like you're long into this point of control retest, you're long into this, you're long into this. I mean, you can just you decide if you want to take all three of those trades, or you only want to trade the deeper ideas, or you don't want to trade any of them. But you know, a common type of comment you might get, like if you're sharing ideas on Twitter, is say you have an idea of this long here at 64.5K, and you take it, and maybe price rallies a little bit, and then price breaks down, and you're interested in this long, or it doesn't really matter what the long is. Maybe it's this long, or maybe it's 50K. Who cares? People will say, you just shared that you wanted to go long here, and now you're going long here. It's like you're just longing everything. Well, obviously, this should make sense. If you have an idea to long support, with invalidation and stop loss, and price goes lower and it takes your stop loss and then keeps going lower, you should have ideas to long lower. You're not in a trade anymore. You've closed it out. You've taken a stop loss. Price keeps going down lower. Are you just retired from trading now because price went lower? So it is just kind of funny. And you could have like 3 or 4 ideas, and I think you should. I mean, I think it's important to be aware of the key ideas here. You should be aware of the ideas down at 50K and how you want to structure those trades. And if an idea is not working and you cut it, then just move on to the next idea. But for some reason, that seems to get quite the reaction out of people, as if you're doing something wrong when it's the very thing you should be doing. All right. Well, let's I mean, is this like maybe it's not as little volatility. I mean, actually, how long have I been live? I kind of call it the live stream curse. I've been live for 2.5 hours. That there's no volatility when I'm live. We've been basically ranging in a 0.2% range. Maybe we break out of it here. Are you a member in the LATF, Vikram? He says, I'm the only one who liked the video and always likes and supports. Make me your apprentice. All right. Well, since you're the only one, message me in the Discord and I'll give you a free membership this month. That's probably not even true. Oh, you just missed out, Andrew Yags. Andrew Yags just comments, hey, Lucky, is there any way to get a free trial of the LATF? I just gave away this. Wait, what the? I don't run them very often. It actually is kind of like bugs out the like automated system of how the Discord roles are managed, or it seems to. I'm not even sure if that's true. But I think like every, I don't know, 5 months or so, probably on average, that's not really on a schedule, I'll run like a 3 or 4 day free trial of the LATF. I've done it occasionally, but it's just kind of annoying. It's like people's roles weren't getting removed, then other people's roles were. I know. I mean, I'll message you, Vikram. I'm in between a rock and a hard place here because I'm just realizing that you're somebody I kicked out of the Discord. It doesn't matter. I'll message you later. Not that it was a huge deal, but I think you're one of like, out of thousands of people, one of like 3 people that's been kicked out of the Discord. Yeah, don't push your luck. Yeah, well, what I'll do, Shores, I don't know how to pronounce that name, I'm sorry, says it would be great to have a live stream during higher volatility. I guess we have that today with FOMC, but that may be a bit late. You know, what I'll do is I'll probably just plan on doing at least I'll do a members live stream. And maybe what I'll do is, if we come into we just start having volatility, I'll just fire it up. I'll just sit down, fire up the live stream, and who's ever available can hop in. Because you can't really, it's kind of hard just to start a live stream and expect volatility. But I thought it'd be good to sit down for a little bit today. Yeah, so maybe at around the New York Open today, I'll just fire up at least a members live stream. Yeah, because I don't really want to sit here any longer, to be honest. It's been 2.5 hours. I mean, guaranteed, as soon as I end the live stream, either this or this is going to happen, which is good. So we'll see. Just for those that don't know, I mean, I think I finally did catch it. I think I went live just because I thought it'd be fun to go live every single time Bitcoin approached all-time highs. And like, I think, for example, because I wanted to be live during the all-time high breakout because I thought that would be a fun live stream, and to have that recorded for posterity's sake. But if I can recall, the old all-time high breakout, I think the first time I went live was right here, like 0.3% before we touched all-time highs. I just sat live for hours, and then I was like, you know what? It's never gonna test all-time highs. So anyways, if I'm live, and then I did the same thing for the second all-time highs because I wanted to be. I was live here, by the way, and I did have a bunch of longs stacked into that, and so this was actually a short trigger and a profit-taking trigger on all the longs for the way up. But same thing happening here. We had big bullish divergences, and anytime I got live, we just ranged sideways for hours. But finally caught this one as well. But anyways, for that said, if I'm sitting live, price just wants to halt and stop moving. It doesn't matter if it's 0.3% away from all-time highs. It's not going to take it. So. I never took a FET trade. I had that marked out as a potential idea of interest, but I never got into it. It's kind of interesting. I don't know. There's some interesting alts, but I've had a couple alerts go off. But right now, I mean, I wouldn't get long on FET here. Up higher, there's the idea of coming and sweeping this wick. Now we're just breaking it down. Never really had any signs of strength here. Flipping it into resistance. No reason, I don't think, to get long on FET. With the big, but anyways, I know it's getting delisted in a bunch of places, and have to go look at this other, this new coin. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.